on and keep going and working.
Straight ahead, a journey winding through our communities and spanning generations.
It's the constant reminder that we should be always striving toward that place full of love and free of hate.
We're meeting the people, bridging a divide and bringing about hope and change.
This was a park exclusively for African Americans. We're celebrating the history of that park.
We've come so far as a community, as a people.
Uncovering the stories of those who work to build a better day for everyone.
When I went to the door to go into the store, he said, "You can't come in here," and I'm wearing my uniform.
And paying tribute to the legacies of those making a difference.
Wow, I'm not dead, I'm still yet alive, and I still can make a difference in a community.
We're honoring those working to create a brighter future for all of us who call Southwest Missouri home. And this, Ozark's first Black History Month special. And welcome to this special presentation honoring Black history. I'm Mike Landis. Well, the African American Heritage Trail in Springfield is a tool teaching the area's history. Right now, that path has 8 stops, and soon there will be a 9th. Our Carissa Codell went to that soon-to-be stop behind Benton Avenue AME Church on Drury's campus.
Yeah, there's not a plaque just yet, but this next spot on the trail will finish out the square of Springfield's African American churches. It will celebrate the history and legacy of the Washington Avenue Baptist Church.
One of the things that's very powerful about the history of African Americans in our community was really just at the end of the slavery era, African Americans had a chance to establish their own houses of worship, if you will.
Lyle Foster, the coordinator of the Springfield Greene County African American Heritage Trail, says these historical places have contributed to what the city is today. He says some of the markers of the trail come from a time when the area was segregated.
For example, Silver Spring Park, for people to know that this was a park exclusively for African Americans. We're celebrating the history of that park and preserving it for the future.
The marker on the square tells the story of the 1906 lynching.
That story has a lot of powerful understanding about how Springfield became what it is. So while it's a very painful part of our history, sometimes we have to actually understand the pain to be able to know where we need to go from here.
And they don't have a date just yet, but sometime in February, this marker will be officially placed. Reporting in Springfield, I'm Carissa Codell.
Well, the Martin Luther King Jr. Bridge in downtown Springfield was not always named after Dr. King. In fact, until October of 2004, it was known as the Benton Avenue Viaduct. Now, Chestnut Expressway was almost renamed for Dr. King, but ultimately the bridge, characterized as a physical connection between downtown and the area rich in history for the Black community, was chosen instead. It's now been known as the Martin Luther King Jr. Bridge for the last 20 years. And 3 months after the Martin Luther King Jr. Bridge was renamed, the first memorial march was held in honor of Dr. King. That march would start a tradition that was carried on for the last 20 years of Black men and women of all ages gathering to march across the span to honor the work and legacy of MLK. This year, the tradition continued on January 20th with hundreds of people gathering to reflect on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Well, the shrine to some of baseball's best and nearly forgotten players is getting too big to miss. The Negro Leagues Baseball Museum in Kansas City, Missouri started in a one-room office about 35 years ago. Tonight, Kevin Berry shows us the drive behind a $30 million plan to expand and modernize the museum about baseball and civil rights.
We've simply run out of space. Yeah, every time we want to tell a new story, we literally have to tear something up.
That's the challenge for Negro Leagues Baseball Museum President Bob Kendrick, because every story in this museum has fought hard to be here.
You see, American historians did us all a tremendous disservice. They kept this wonderful chapter of baseball and Americana away from us.
Chapters about how after playing at Kansas City's old municipal stadium, Negro Leagues players would come just a few blocks down to 18th and Vine enjoying the rich entertainment scene.
All the jazz musicians wanted to be baseball players. All the baseball players wanted to be jazz musicians.
Or chapters about how Mr. Cub himself, Ernie Banks, had to be convinced to go to Chicago after falling in love with Kansas City while playing for the Monarchs in the Negro Leagues.
He didn't want to leave. They had to push him out the nest because here And I can understand it. He was comfortable.
It's why Kendrick says legendary Monarch Buck O'Neil and other former players would pay the rent themselves to keep their one-room museum open in the early 1990s. A move across the street in 1997 got them their current 10,000 square foot museum space, and now a $30 million fundraising campaign is trying to triple that space just down the block, bringing people in for the baseball, and Kendrick says, teaching them so much more.
This is a civil rights, social justice institution. It's just seen through the lens of baseball.
This project is going to bring the Buck O'Neil Education and Research Center to the historic Paseo YMCA, where Negro League's founders formalized their league in 1920. New structures will bring apartments and hotels, bringing some of the energy that had been at 18th and Vine in the past.
During that era of American segregation, it was essentially about 13 blocks that black folks could operate in this city. Within those 13 blocks, oh man, you had everything you needed.
A handful of other renovation and development projects have either already been finished or are in the works nearby, like film critic Sean Edwards' Boone Theater restoration.
It only makes sense because this part of Kansas City is the cradle to so much black history that has impacted the entire world.
Once the theater is restored, Edwards is going to open up the Black Movie Hall of Fame, essentially starting in one room just like the Negro League's Baseball Museum across the street.
The Negro League's Baseball Museum of Bob Kendrick, I study that and him to death. They have created the blueprint.
The blueprint to remember the past.
I don't want these stories to ever die.
And make it part of the future.
It's based on one small, simple principle. You won't let me play with you in the major leagues? Then I'll create my own league. And man, what a league it was.
I'm Kevin Barry in Kansas City.
Admission to the museum will be free for the entire month of February thanks to a partnership with the KC Royals. This will be the 4th year for visitors to have that opportunity. Still ahead, preserving black history in the Queen City. Whether it's at Missouri State University or a local park, we'll show you how people are working to keep black history alive for generations to come. And why is Black History Month celebrated every February? Well, according to the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, Black History Month started back in 1926 as Negro History Week. The celebratory week was set in February to coincide with the birthdays of Frederick Douglass and President Abraham Lincoln. Read even more about Black history on OzarksFirst.com under the Living Ozarks tab. And next up, we're featuring a Springfield woman whose job is helping preserve the past and educating new generations at historic Timmons Hall. Our Parker Padgett sat down with Christine Peoples to talk about her efforts to keep the past here in the present.
Christine Peoples didn't think a job at the library would lead her to here.
Word of mouth started happening because I really did not seek this role. But because I've been working in the community for so long and on the same things, that it came to me.
But when the park board took over Timmons Hall, it wasn't long before she was the best person for the job.
They kept hearing my name, and I was really blessed to have, folks seek me out, and I came and I applied for it. And I had the backing of my community.
Timmons Hall is part historical artifact and part educational outlet, something Peoples pushes every year.
It's really a perfect place to have history come out of it and to solidify that Black folks were here and they were thriving.
Peoples says that Black history is important to recognize when it comes to the story of how Springfield came to be.
The lady behind me, that's Alberta Ellis. Her family came pre-statehood, and they were right outside Ebenezer. And so they've always been here.
Each year, Peoples puts on Freedom Classroom 101, bringing people from across the country to share their stories in Springfield.
I want to bring community back that we've lost. And I think that some of the disconnect is because we need to go back and revisit and think about those times, because the idea that we wouldn't be here today, none of us, if our past hadn't been first.
Peoples continues to bring the past to the present.
It's more prevalent right now than it ever has been for this generation, because other generations, the past generations, they had a method. They understood what needed to be done from the teachers of Lincoln School here in Springfield to the churches throughout this heritage trail. They knew what needed to be done, and they were all unified. So it makes a huge difference.
Reporting in Springfield, I'm Parker Paget.
Well, a cornerstone of community for a lot of African Americans in Springfield is Silver Springs Park. Now, it was once the only park that African Americans were allowed to use when segregation was still legally enforced in Springfield. Well, now it's still a gathering place for the black community, but upgrades are underway to keep it around for future generations.
We think it's a jewel. It was the heart of the African American community, and in my mind, it still is.
Renovations on the park's pavilion are still underway, and they're expected to be complete this summer for the annual Park Day reunion. Well, still ahead, providing and proving change is possible. We're highlighting the mayor of Ferguson, Missouri, and how she is making some history. Breaking barriers and making history, Ella Jones became the first black mayor of Ferguson, Missouri. That's the city that became a national symbol in the fight for racial justice. Kelly Hoskins spoke with Mayor Jones about the challenges she's faced and her vision for the city's future.
This month is special where we stop and take a look at everyone who has contributed to building this country.
As we honor Black History Month, Ferguson Mayor Ella Jones' election proved that change is possible when communities come together.
I was at the Emerson Family YMCA yesterday, and they was building their wall of Black history. And when I walked through, I saw my picture. I was like, wow, I'm not dead. I'm still yet alive, and I still can make a difference in a community. I still can make a difference in this world.
Ella Jones made history, becoming the first black mayor of Ferguson, Missouri. Her election came at a critical time for the city, which gained national attention following the 2014 police killing of Michael Brown, an event that sparked nationwide protests and ignited the Black Lives Matter movement.
So Black history to me is getting out here, servicing people, be of service, improve your community, and make it the best place that you will want to stay and invite others to live next door to you.
Jones, a former Ferguson City Council member, stepped into leadership with a commitment to police reform, economic development, and community healing. She campaigned on bringing people together, ensuring transparency in government, and fostering trust between law enforcement and residents.
When you live in a community, you have to give back. You just have to give back. And you have to participate. And a lot of people called me. I travel all over the city, all over the United States, talking about Ferguson. But my number one thing that I share, people are not interested in how much you know until you show them how much you care. And that builds trust. If you have leaders that you can't trust, then the whole community is up in an uproar and it's confused. But when you have leaders that listen to you and you can trust them, that makes a difference.
Coming up ahead, honoring the legacy of Springfield native Walter Majors, from his time serving our country to building a stamp on history. Stay tuned. In the 19th century and early 20th centuries, a group of African American soldiers were tasked with protecting vast stretches of land here in the U.S. These troops were known as the Buffalo Soldiers. They are considered the first all-black professional soldiers in the U.S. They were also trailblazers in establishing some of the country's first national parks. A group of them helped protect Yosemite National Park. You can watch their incredible stories of those Buffalo Soldiers on ozarksfirst.com under the Living Ozarks tab. Walter Majors was a Springfield man who lived in the city back in the early 1900s. Now, he was an inventor, a veteran, among other titles, but he was best known for being the first man in Springfield to not only drive a car, but build one. Jared Henry spoke with a Springfield native who grew up knowing Majors' family.
He was the first in Springfield, period. You know, I mean, That in itself says a lot. If he's black or white, he made the first automobile seen on the streets of Springfield.
Harold McPherson grew up in Springfield, where his family, which had been in the area for generations, told him stories of Majors. As of today, McPherson has spent decades researching Majors.
This is a man who they knew, who made an automobile and drove it around. That was my first awareness of him. And as I got older, I started reading other things about him and finding other information about him.
Majors served in the Spanish-American War. He was also a mechanic, as well as a bicycle and violin repairman. I also spoke with John Sellers, the executive director of the History Museum on the Square, about what Majors accomplished.
He was a great inventor. He holds patents, over 20 patents from the United States Patent Office. I mean, the man was a genius.
Majors made his drive around the downtown square in April of 1901, where he reached speeds of up to 7 miles per hour. This led to him being fined.
Thought it was too much of a distraction.
A few years after his joyride around the square, Majors left Springfield. It is not exactly known why. Those who have studied Majors believe it was because of the racial climate in the area, citing the lynching of 3 black men in 1906.
Springfield was not a safe place for a lot of black people to live at that time.
Majors then went to St. Louis, where he built a school to help teach mechanics, and even worked with black hair care icon and millionaire Annie Malone.
He started a mail order business for her, and that really increased her reach throughout the country.
His training school in St. Louis was one of a kind, and was replicated in other places across the country.
Both Sellers and McPherson say this was only a portion of Walter Majors' impact. Reporting in Springfield, I'm Jared Henry.
Well, coming up, still making a difference, how Lieutenant Colonel Martha Baker is being honored for her contributions to the U.S. military. Well, the strong impact of African Americans in the U.S. military is evident throughout our nation's history. As Shaw Turner reports, Colorado is home to a celebrated retired lieutenant colonel who, at the age of 97, is still making a difference.
A time to reflect and a time to honor the contributions of women who bravely served their country.
Here, 70 years later, my whole life changed because I joined the Army.
The Military Women's Memorial proclaiming Lieutenant Colonel Martha Baker a living legend in a special ceremony attended by Aurora's mayor and other dignitaries.
Anybody that comes to the National Military Women's Memorial in Arlington, Virginia, can put in Lieutenant Colonel Martha Baker, and on a big television screen, your story and photo comes up, and we can always read about what you did as a nurse, serving with the junior ROTC instructor.
Baker developed a passion for helping others early in her life, saving money to pay for nursing school, then caring for patients at a New Jersey hospital.
My salary was $78.
And that was for 2 weeks of night duty. Baker enlisted in the Army in 1951 and was stationed at Fort Dix in New Jersey.
I went to Germany from LaGuardia, 18 hours across the Atlantic on a Flying Tiger plane, 2 propellers.
President Harry Truman ended segregation in the military in 1948, integrating 300 hospitals around the world, including Korea, where Baker served as an operating room nurse. She would also travel to Japan and Vietnam.
I went so many places, I met so many people.
Even with the admiration and respect she earned among her peers in the military, Baker still experienced racism at home. She recalls a painful memory of what happened when she tried to enter a store in Maryland.
When I went to the door to go into the store, he said, "You can't come in here," and I'm wearing my uniform.
And to know somebody like Colonel Baker that did things, and because she was black, she couldn't do certain things that I just take for granted, that could have taken for granted even then.
Today, Baker sits surrounded by love and support from those in and out of the military as she continues to inspire well into her 97th year.
Oh, everything that happened, it was like God was just leading me.
amazing story there to wrap up our special presentation honoring Black history. Now, all the stories in tonight's broadcast are available on our website, ozarksfirst.com. Thanks so much for joining us.